Valley has been organizing weekend sessions from the month of July. Every Saturday, 5:30 p.m., we are having a global master talk. So today, for our session, we have Susan Griffith-Jones. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Shalini.
So great to hear you. So my dear friends, let me introduce Susan to you. So she is going to talk on the topic, the Rainbow Bridge. The Rainbow Bridge, which is directly perceiving emptiness whilst holding appearance. In this talk, Susan bridges the divide between perceiving the world around us and the energy of our innermost heart essence. Here, through using passages from her book, The Rainbow Bridge, to elucidate the topic, she describes the step-by-step process to be able to see through the objective world and place our perception directly within our intrinsic awareness. So my dear friends, Susan is the author of the book The Rainbow Bridge and also another great book called The Pyramid Spiral. She was brought up in UK and has been studying and practicing the diamond path of Tibetan Buddhism for several decades. With the great masters from the Tibet, she has been directly learning from them. Her root teacher, Trichin Rinpoche, a master of masters, introduced her to the great vision of Vajrayana. Since his passing, it has been her vocation to transmit these teachings into diverse forms of media, whereby, among other things, she makes innovative, creative, artistic documentaries, writes books, and builds large collage mandalas with the photographs she takes around the world. Susan also frequently speaks at the conferences around the world about her work, which we can view on her website, www.pyramidkey.com. So I will post her website. You can have a look onto it. So such a great international speaker is here with us today, and let us hear from her. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you for your introduction. Before I get to that particular topic, I'm going to fill you in with a little bit of background as to how this book came about, because it's actually a very beautiful story and one which takes me through a number of years while I was living in Nepal, in Bodhanath, which is, as many of you may know, where the wonderful stupa of Bodhanath is situated. Some of you may have been there and seen this wonderful place. So I start with the title and the subtitle of the book. The title of the book, The Rainbow Bridge, it in itself describes in a nutshell the meaning of the whole text. And then the subtitle, Directly Perceiving Emptiness Whilst Holding Appearance, elucidates this point just a little bit more. So the Rainbow Bridge is what's connecting our innermost heart essence of awareness to our outermost manifest appearance. And as our consciousness crosses that bridge step by step and moves from its most subtle state to its grossest state, then we see different layers of reality as that occurs in our conscious perception. Directly perceiving emptiness whilst holding appearance is the entire bridge in one step. So rather than going layer by layer between the conscious state of the most subtle conscious state to the most gross conscious state, we have this all-pervasive vision of both the most subtle state and the most gross state at the same time. But I'll discuss that a little bit more as I continue. Shalini introduced the fact that I had studied with a great master of masters, in fact, for a number of years in Nepal, in Bodhanath. And actually, whenever I see his face, as I'm looking at him now on the screen, my heart stops a second, and I have to remember his greatness, and actually his greatness even today, because there is no time and space when it comes to the master. The master may have passed into another dimensional state beyond this physical universe that we live in, but is ever present. And that's a connection that one has with one's root guru, something that I only discovered, and something that has to be experienced, not explained, rather than I can try to explain to you in many words what this means, but I think you get the point. It's a very precious connection that one has with one's root teacher. And so the story begins, actually, the story of the Rainbow Bridge begins when, while I was studying under His Eminence Kebbedoddi Rinpoche in Kathmandu, in Bodhanath, and I was doing several different types of practices. And so I would get some teachings, and then I would go off and practice them, sometimes for a week or two, sometimes for a month or two in retreat, sometimes in my room in Bodhanath, and sometimes I would even go out into different places in the Himalayas or beyond to sacred holy pilgrimage sites to do the practice there, where the energy is very conducive to practice, because yogins since millennia gone by have been to these places and left some of their spiritual essence just in the atmosphere, so to speak. I was doing one practice in particular at that time, of which Chökyi Trungchen Rinpoche's lineage holds a very great a practice. It's the practice of the female deity Vajra Yogini. Vajra meaning diamond, Yogini meaning like a female practitioner. But it's a very in-depth practice where you follow visualizations, recite mantras, and work on your inner energy channels in different respects. And if you're in a retreat situation, for example, then each session may last up to about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And traditionally, you practice 4 sessions a day. So it can be up to 12 or 13 hours a day of quite intensive, different mental exercises, and focusing your energy in different parts of your body, or inner channels of your body. So I was doing this practice with His Eminence, and so I would do my practice and then go back to him and report my experiences and what I've understood and realizations and this and that, and then he would guide me to the next step. So it came to a point where I was inspired to go to a very special and sacred holy land or holy area in Tibet, which is also very conducive to the practice of this female deity Vajra Yogini, because the layout of the landscape is in proportion with her inner body mandala and also her outer appearance. It's a sacred geographical landscape in that sense. And the place is in southern Tibet, called Pema Kur. And to get there is not so easy. You have to travel first. If you're traveling from Kathmandu, like I was, you have to travel across the Himalayas, through the Nepalese, Tibetan, Chinese border, and then get to Lhasa, and then from there there's another whole journey on, quite a distance from there. And so I had been to Rinpoche with this idea to go to visit Pema Kur and to do a retreat of this female deity Vajra Yogini in the place. And he had thrown his dice, prediction dice called Mo in Tibetan Buddhism. The Tibetan master will either he'll use his mala, or he'll use these dice called Mo to make a prediction. And he had said, yes, excellent, very good plan, go ahead. So I booked up all my tickets and got my Chinese visa and my Tibetan permit, and booked myself on a tour from Kathmandu to Lhasa in a jeep, and had made the preparations. 3 days before leaving for the retreat, I went to visit Rinpoche to tell him that I'm leaving. And he said, "Oh, very good, very good. Oh, actually, I have a very good friend, a Lama who lives in Penako, and his name is," and he scribbled down the name on a little piece of paper and he gave it to me. And he said, "When you get there, you could go and look up this Lama and he will help you." So, of course, I was extremely impressed by this. I was really feeling very excited to have been given the contact of a Lama in this place that I was going, and filled with a kind of excitement as to what may happen now with this. I was going to meet this Lama, and maybe some very exciting and interesting things were going to happen, and all the rest of it. But I asked Rinpoche, so, this place, Pemaka, is a very large area, so where am I likely to find this Lama? And he said, well, he's associated with this, and he gave me the name of this master, another very great master, alive last century, called Dujum Rinpoche. And he gave me the name. He said, you can go to the Dujum Rinpoche monastery in Pemaka, or the place that's associated with Dujum Rinpoche, and you'll get the information there about this Lama. He may even be there. So I left Rinpoche's study very happy, but I thought, I was a little bit concerned that Pemaka is a very large area, and how would I find this Lama like a needle in a haystack in this place? So I decided to visit the associate monastery of Dujum Rinpoche, which is in the Bodhanat area, just a couple of 100 meters away from the stupa, to try and get some more information about this Lama and where I could find him in Pemaka. And so the next morning, I arrived at the Dujum Rinpoche monastery, and I walked through the gate. And it was a mid-morning and very sunny day, and on the bench, this Lama was sitting on the bench, and he sort of beckoned over to me and patted the seat next to me. Come, 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 he said in English. I was very surprised. Elderly Tibetan Lamas often don't speak English. But he introduced himself to me as the abbot of the monastery. And he asked about me and what I'm doing and where I'm from, etc., etc. And then he asked me what I'm looking for. And so I told him that my Lama, His Eminence Chukyi Trijang Rinpoche, has given me the name of this guru in Pemaka, and that I would like to know exactly where I could find him in Pemaka. And so he said, "Oh yeah, please give me the name of the Lama." And so I passed over the little piece of paper, and he's burst out laughing, and he was laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing, and he went on for several minutes just laughing and laughing, and I was sitting looking at him, wondering when he's going to stop. And finally, he could hardly speak without continuing to laugh, but he says, "This Lama has been dead for 15 years. And in that moment, I completely got it. It felt like the penny dropped in that moment, that I was completely chasing rainbows. I was searching for some kind of excitement. I was looking for entertainment, that this idea of going to this place was actually, for the practice and everything else, was a kind of superficial aspect of me really wanting to search for some kind of adventure or experience. And I totally got it in that moment. I can't say what I got in so many words, but I saw that I was really chasing rainbows. And within several hours, I went back to Rinpoche, and I told him this. And I said, you know what? I don't need to go there. I don't need to go to Pemaka. I don't need to go anywhere. Actually, what I need to do is to sit in Bodhanat here in my room and do my practice here, and really do my practice. not go out there searching for some kind of adventure or interesting things to happen. So he looked at me and he said, okay. I said, so that's it. I'm going to do this retreat in my room. And he said to me very calmly, he said, if you have the time and if you have the money, then please go to Muktinath. And I'm like, Muktinath? What are you talking about, Muktinath? You mean Muktinath in Mustang in Nepal? Mustang is a region in the northern part of Nepal, next to the Tibetan border in central Nepal. Very high, rocky region. And actually, I'd already been there. I said to Rinpoche, I've already been to Muktinath. There's no need for me to go there again. I honestly, I'm going to stay in my room in Bodhana to do my retreat here. And he said, if you have the time and if you have the money, please go to Muktinath. And so again, I kind of a little bit not squabbled with him, but I've already been. What's the point? I don't need to go anywhere. All appearance is the same. Anywhere I go is going to be the same thing in the outer manifestation. What I really need to do is to focus on my practice. If you have the time and if you have the money, please go to Muktinath. So that was enough for me to really realize that there was something in this. And so I didn't have to go. I mean, it was still my choice. I could have still gone to Tibet. I could have still stayed in my room in Bodhanath. His insistence and his, obviously the fact that I respected him deeply meant that I was swayed by this comment. So I made plans to go to Muktinath, and within 5 days I arrived in the Muktinath Valley. Now, my first trip to Muktinath, I'm going to go backwards about 5 years to my first trip to Muktinath. And this is actually another whole story. In fact, this is how I first came to Nepal. And anyway, I'm not going to get into the story now, otherwise I'm not going to have time to get into anything else. But it was a very fortuitous occasion when, through dreams and through other very mystical signs, I ended up in Nepal and ended up traveling to Muktinath with Lama Pema Longpa Rinpoche, the Lama of Muktinath. And we had to travel through, as you can see, the little planes that normally go into the mountains were not running because of the monsoon, and we had to traverse the Kaligandaki during the monsoon, which was really a very treacherous journey, but very, very awe-inspiring in many, many ways. And here is me in the bottom right corner with the nuns of Muktinath. I stayed there for almost a month with them at that time. So I'd already been to Muktinath. I'd already been all around the valley, and I knew quite a lot of things about the Muktinath Valley. So actually, I wasn't so excited to go there because I'd already been there. So it was a good place for me to go and do my retreat, I thought, in that sense. But it seemed that Rinpoche had some other things in mind. So as I was leaving the room, and I decided already, okay, Rinpoche, I'll go to Muktinath. He, in fact, as I was leaving the room, his attendant came running after me and said, Susan, Rinpoche is telling you, take photographs. Now, this was a very surprising comment. Why would Rinpoche want me to be taking photographs? And quite ironically, literally a week before this, the Muktinath Lama, the Lama of Muktinath, who I had been traveling with on my first trip to Muktinath, had given me this, you see down here, this 1960s, best of its type Pentax camera, which was a click and wind film camera, and the light meter and the light meter was broken on it, however. So I had to have a very fast track lesson from a photographer friend of mine as to how to use it. I'd had the reason why he'd given me this camera was that I'd had a very smart digital camera that I brought to Nepal for my first trip to Muktinath. And in the middle of the Kaligandaki on one morning, it had dropped and broken, completely broken, no use. So Muktinath Lama, who was remembering this, he gave me this camera, and it was ironically a week before I was leaving this trip. So with the camera in tow, I ended up in the Muktinath Valley for my second journey to Muktinath. Now, the camera turned out to be a very, very important part of this journey and a very, very important part of this teaching, because I learned through taking, actually, I have to be honest, I got a little bit obsessed. I was taking pictures of rocks and stones and trees and mountains and rivers, and I ended up taking more than 1,000 photographs on this trip. It was something like 18 reels of 36 click and wind film. And anyhow, the one thing that I noticed while I was in the valley was this mountain that you can see here. This mountain is at the backside of Muktinath, and it was often prominent from many different angles when I was taking photographs. And it just got me wondering at one point, I kept finding this through my viewfinder. I kept seeing this mountain, and sometimes it was on the left, sometimes it was on the right, sometimes it was in the middle, sometimes it was large, sometimes it was small. And I'm like, this is telling me something, that, this mountain is always fundamentally the same thing. It has a size, it has a position, it has a shape, and that doesn't fundamentally change. But when I change my viewpoint of it, so it seems to change size and shape and position and all the rest of it. This got me looking at the situation very deeply, because then I equated that with my own viewpoint and how I see reality around me. And I'm seeing that fundamentally, appearance itself never really changes in its essential state. But when I see it as this or that, or from a judgment point of view, or from a critical analysis or whatever, then it very much changes its. I change my perspective on it. So this was the first very big lesson that the camera taught me in the valley of Muktinath, and one which I used to go much deeper into the nature of mind, the nature of awareness, and the quality of awareness that bridges the gap between our appearance and awareness, which of course is our perception. So here are some pictures of this second trip that I took to the Muktinath Valley, and you'll see this little temple here in the top right corner. I don't know if you can see it over the screens. There we go. This little temple in the top right corner is where I did my retreat. But when I knew I was going to go into retreat in the Muktinath Valley, I got in touch with Lama Pema Wongil, Muktinath Lama, and I asked if I could do a retreat at his temple. And he said, yes, of course. And in fact, this is a very important temple of the Muktinath Valley, where there's a statue. This is the statue, and the one beneath it. I'm putting my cursor on it. I hope you can see it. And it's a statue of a very great Indian sage, Padmasambhava, who actually came through the Muktinath Valley on his way to Tibet. And when he was leaving, the locals, and especially the females of the valley, were very upset that he was leaving. And so he said, okay, I'll make a statue that looks like me, so that I'll never be apart from you. And this statue is said to have been made by his very own hands. Now, this statue sits inside this temple, right in the heart of this little temple. And when I arrived there on the first day, this is when already some magic had occurred on the day, but the magic just continued step by step on this, step by step of the way on this journey. And I went into the temple to pay my respects to the shrine and to get myself acquainted with the building. And as I was standing there, I was looking at the statue and looking into the eyes of this statue, and it seemed as if the statue were talking to me. Now, I'm not saying the statue was actually talking to me, but the statue in this moment became like a mirror of my mind. And I started getting a lot of information about my retreat and what I should be doing. In fact, it was very aggressive with me. My mind, statue, however you want to look at it, and he was telling me, "What are you here for? What is your purpose? Why have you come? I want you to sit here in front of my statue. I want you to recite my mantra until you get it." I was all set to do a retreat on a completely different deity. I mentioned this, the deity of the Vajrayogini, the diamond female practitioner. And I knew in that moment that I should just drop it and I should listen to what was coming to me. And then the second part of the instruction was, and you do this by night. So this was quite, this was still March. It was really very, very cold. This is 4,000 meters above sea level. You can see in the bottom right corner here, it actually snowed quite a lot the time I was there. And so by night I would wrap myself in a blanket and I'd go down about 10 p.m. and I'd sit and I'd start reciting the mantra and look into the face of this statue and continue to recite the mantra. And then after about a week of doing this, again, this effect of the statue talking to me or the mirror of my mind talking to me, however you want to look at it, occurred. And again, very aggressively said, "Now, what do you think you're doing sitting here night by night reciting the mantra? Get out of here. Get out of here and see me in the eyes of every being." Now, okay, it occurred like this, but then the next morning, another very interesting occurrence happened when the police showed up at the door of the Gompa and they said, "You've got to get out." And I'm like, "Why? I have the permission of the Mukjinat Lama to be here. No foreigners can stay inside the temple premises." You see the top left corner here, you might just see a white fence around this area here. This is the complex of the Mukti Gyatso, and this temple is situated about here in this complex. There are another couple of temples dotted around this, inside this wall. The temple's around here. So the police said, "Sorry, no." I said, "But I stayed here around a month, some years ago." And he's like, no more. Foreigners are no longer allowed to stay inside this complex. So it had come from a kind of inner voice had said, and now an outer voice was saying it. So I was like, okay, I'm packed up and left. Now, this was incredible because this actually took me on a journey that I would have never otherwise taken around the valley, from north to south to east to west, from up to down to in to out. I mean, literally, I scoured the valley and I did the rest of my retreat while I was going around each area of the valley. So I would stop in a village or in a temple and I'd stay there overnight and then I'd move on the next day like this. So step by step, I covered the ground of the valley and taking these photographs. And taking these photographs until there were more than 1,000 photographs taken. And this is where I would say the second real magic occurred, because sometimes I can honestly say I don't know if what I was actually seeing was really there. For example, I take the example of this picture at the top left, this lady who's seemingly appearing out of this beam of light. I cannot tell you if she was really there or not. The same occurred in this village where this woman appeared with this white horse and beckoned to me and took me to this it's quite a little bit like a tantric feast that was going on. It was a very odd occurrence. I won't go into the whole scenario, but it was as if I was kind of brushing shoulders with the physical world, was brushing shoulders with an etheric reality at this point, and rainbows and rainbows and rainbows and rainbows and more rainbows everywhere. This camera was capturing the light, the inner light of this valley. So when I got back to Kathmandu after a month of traveling in the Mukti Valley, I was very inspired, to say the least. And I went straight back into retreat in my room in Bodhanath, but this time I did the retreat of the Vajrayogini practice. And this retreat was completely disturbed right from the beginning by this text that would, excuse me, these verses of this text that would just come at any moment that they wanted to. I would be reciting a mantra and then suddenly some more verses would come and then I would be writing it down. And then again, I'd be disturbed later in the middle of the night, waking up and having to write down these verses. And it was quite a flow in the sense that I wasn't really having to think about what I was going to write. I was just writing it. It was very spontaneous in that sense. So you'll see that one of these pictures of the rainbows I used in my. These are 2 pages from my book, from the book The Rainbow Bridge. This is a page taken from the book itself. So the very first verse of the text is a prologue, and I've already explained to you the title Rainbow Bridge, the subtitle Directly Perceiving Emptiness Whilst Holding Appearance. But now the prologue, again in this one verse, the entire essence of the text is summed up in this verse. So I'm going to go through this verse with you. Let's go to I've written it out in slightly larger text, so it's easier for you to see this. I give you one task, O reader of this text. Ingest the fire of wisdom nectar and digest each word, then conjure the picture. Let's have a look at those few lines. So this is instructing the reader to immediately put his or her mind into the correct state so that it is in a position to be able to understand the words as they were written and to be able to find the vision that that word or those words had been created from. For this translation is of images now evaporated and replaced with words of human awareness. So if I just explain to you while I was writing the text, in fact, it was a little bit like a kaleidoscope. I could see a little bit like a kaleidoscopic vision inside my head. So somewhere here behind my eyes. And it was very clear to me in the moment that I was writing the text, and it wasn't like a mandala or a pattern that was perfectly symmetrical. It was more like a gelatinous blob of different colors that would open so that I could go deeper into it, and the colors would mutate and the shapes would slightly change as I went deeper into the picture. And it was very simple, because writing the words of this text, all I would need to do was to focus on this picture, this moving shape in my head, and describe it. And I know that sounds very ephemeral in a sense, because I wasn't anything that has form or has any particular meaning to it, but it was very clear when I was doing it, is all I can say. So I would just focus on this vision in my head and just keep on writing the words, and they would come down verse by verse by verse. So this is here, for this translation is of images. By images I mean what I was seeing, now evaporated and replaced with words of human awareness. So there was a translation of this picture in my head in this sense. The clarity of perception ever determining the nature of appearance as it crosses the rainbow bridge to its birthless existence. So this is really bringing us to the main point, is that depending on our perspective, so we will understand or interpret. So we will interpret the appearance around us, and it will always have this mirror-like quality to it. So depending on one's clarity of perception, how close is one's perception to the actual truth of the situation. So perception in that sense being a relative truth of the absolute state of being. Then if our mind is in the correct wisdom, as I've said in the beginning here, ingest the fire of wisdom nectar, if the mind is in that state of wisdom, then and then the quality of perception of that wisdom is aligned with that, then it will not misinterpret the words that it is reading or hearing. So this is really a very important point. And again, as it crosses the rainbow bridge to its birthless existence, this is pointing back to what I said in the beginning, varying degrees of subtlety of consciousness from the most subtle layer of our conscious awareness to the grossest form of appearance. So this is the section 1, the pen. And the pen actually has 31 verses, but I'm just going to talk about the first couple of verses here, because again, this brings up a number of very nice points. And you'll see here this picture on the left. I was staying for a couple of days in the Dharamshala, the pilgrim guest house in the area, and there were a lot of pilgrims there who had come to Muktinath to visit the temples, and I took this picture at that time. So the first 3 verses of the pen, there are actually in total in the Rainbow Bridge, there are 5 sections in total, and this first verse of the pen is an introduction to the whole text. And then the sections 2 to section 5 are getting a little bit more into the meditation practices that are associated with this, and I'm going to take you through that in a moment. But first I'm going to read to you the first 3 verses of the pen, and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about here. This is actually an allegory of a pen and a blank piece of paper, and it's an allegory of the mind. The page is an allegory of the blank page is an allegory of our fundamental nature of mind, our state of pure awareness. And the pen is the perceptive quality of that pure awareness that has the capacity to create and to understand and to interpret that essential state of being. The page is blank, the pen wet, poised above the pregnant emptiness. Anything may arise, may appear in forms that speak their truth through a multitude of displays. For inside each character, each letter is contained the essence of the unity of light and sound. Thus with light as great bliss and sound as pure emptiness, the great truth is proclaimed. O pen, please keep your true nature in mind and form union with the empty space. So again, there's this instruction for the mind to put itself into the correct viewpoint, so that it doesn't misinterpret anything that it reads on the page. And so there will also be a kind of direct communication between what has been written and what is being read. and there will be no misjudgment of the text in that sense. So it mentions that this page is blank and the pen is wet. So this pen that is the perceptive quality of this absolute state is waiting, is poised to spill out its nectar of creativity onto the page, and the page is willing to receive this union with the pen, because in order, once the page has received some letters on it, some forms, some light, and some essence of the form having the essence of light, once it's received this onto its now blank surface, it will have a meaning to it, whereas now it's just all potential. I mean, onto a blank piece of paper, anything could be written, anything could be drawn, anything at all. And again, at the end of this first verse, anything may appear in forms that speak their truth through a multitude of displays. So it doesn't matter what is written on the page. Everything has that essential truth to it. The letter itself, the character that's written, being the light aspect of the image, and inside that character, whatever it may be, a letter or whatever, is an inherent quality of sound. So although the sound is not sounding, one can still see the letter on the page, and that sound is still inherent inside the form. So these two things can never be separated, light and sound. And at the same time, this state of emptiness, and emptiness being this quality of awareness, that this state of awareness that holds all potential within it, and the potential being this appearing aspect. So there's always these two things going on. There's always this union of appearance and emptiness, with anything that may occur even in our lives. I mean, we ourselves are seeing an appearance around us all the time, and we are perceiving that appearance all the time. And if we allow that appearance to just be in its fundamental state of pure emptiness, then our perception will not be ruffled by any occurrence that may happen in our surroundings, because we will understand that the fundamental nature of that appearance is that emptiness. And by emptiness, I don't mean to avoid. It's not a vacuum. It's not an emptiness in that sense. Like I've mentioned here, it's pregnant emptiness. The emptiness is full of potential, but it just hasn't yet manifested yet. And it requires that quality of perception in order to manifest it. So these are very great tools once one has aligned one's mind in this fundamental nature with the fundamental nature of reality. Then the perception becomes a great tool for creativity, and then the perception will also not be confused by the appearance, any appearance that is occurring around it, because it will know its inherent truth. So again, the last instruction: O pen, please keep your true nature in mind and form union with the empty space. This is, again, very keen instruction to the pen to stay in that knowledge of its empty, pregnant, empty state, and stay in with whatever occurs around it to be able to interpret reality accordingly. So actually, after I'd written this book, after I'd written The Rainbow Bridge, a lot of people really liked this first section of the pen, which is 31 verses. So I wrote an expanded commentary on it and made it into a whole nother little book. And that is The Pen, A Way of Writing. So that is another offshoot of The Rainbow Bridge. Now, section 2, the perception of intrinsic awareness, is where, in fact, Shalini, if I'm going to be conducting the meditation, then I'd like to use this section as the basis for that meditation. You had mentioned previously that you might be doing the breathing meditation again, but would you like me to use this as the meditation?
Yes. So how much time would you like to go for meditation?
Well, what I'll do is I'll go through this section, and in fact, in the Rainbow Bridge, you're seeing now a page of the Rainbow Bridge, and this is in the section of the root text. But then there are other sections which, after this, you'll see here is the root text, and then comes the commentary. So here, for example, is the commentary to this section 2. Now, section 2 has 8 verses, so it's quite short, but it's also very, very precisely what I'm trying to explain to you here. Now, it's very, one can easily trip over one's words when one is describing the nature of mind, because it is not a state to be described in words, which makes this whole conversation ironic, because I've written a book about this. So what I've been trying to do is to point towards this state. And in the second section of the Rainbow Bridge, where now each of the sections have a commentary and they have a little meditation section to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you the verse, and then I'm going to read to you the instruction for the meditation, and we'll just think about that, and we can either close our eyes or keep our eyes open as you like. In fact, this kind of meditation is also really good with your eyes open, because we are not trying to let go of appearance here. We're not trying to shut down any appearance here. In fact, we're trying to embrace all appearance as a direct manifestation of our essential fundamental state. I had this incredible vision of the valley at that point, where I could see, you see here the Vajrayogini mandala on the bottom right corner. And actually, if you were to look at the valley from an aerial perspective, this mandala is pretty much concurrent with the various points around the valley. There is a ridge, in the central ridge in the middle, and then there are 4 little villages, 1, 2, 3, 4, dotted around. You'll see these here, there's a dotted around, and then the shape of the valley itself is in these double triangular forms. So as I told you in the beginning, I'd wanted to go to this place in Tibet that had this geographical space that is meant to represent Vajrayogini's body, but actually I'd found it here in the place that Rinpoche had sent me to. Now, a lot of other things happened with the photographs. I told you I had 1,200 pictures, and I started making the photo collage art pieces. This is a 6 foot by 6 foot collage. It's called 2 Keys, 1 Lock. I think we can't see the title here because these are in the way. 2 Keys, 1 Lock. And it's the meaning of this is the union of absolute and relative reality, which is what we've been talking about, our awareness with its relative aspect of perception, or its relative aspect of appearance. And then again, a second picture, which I made with these photographs of Muktinath, pure vision transformed into organized confusion. Again, there are a lot of different meanings in here, but I'm not going to go through that now. I'm just giving you the example of what I did with the photographs after coming back from this journey. And the exhibition that I did in Kathmandu at that time, Virtual Mustang, to show these pictures. And an art piece that I made, which again, this spiral, which is placed upon a mirror, is representing our quality of conscious perception that when it looks in the mirror, it is a mirror of appearance, it is exactly reflected. So that's in a nutshell what this art piece means. But as Shalini knows, I've written a whole book about this, the pyramid spiral, Dance of the Five Elements. So there's a lot more points to understand there. And then on the back of this, I made a film, The Circle of Immortality, also called The Circle of Immortality. So my point in showing you this, and also one more point here, I did a research project with Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu, and for that I needed to go deeper into the cultural and societal and geographical and all these different aspects of the Muktinath Valley. So I kept the Rainbow Bridge in its original form and added a whole section at the beginning, which had all this information about the place in it. So Muktinath's Secret Treasure of Annapurna, the Rainbow Bridge. So actually my point in telling you this is that those three very simple words of a master who could see into so greatly into the situation to be able to tell me those three words, go to Muktinath, he was actually in that moment throwing a snowball down a huge mountain that has been gathering and gathering and gathering. And now even today, years and years, decades later, I am still expanding those ripples from this first journey to Muktinath, which started me off on this path of expressing creatively, attempting to creatively express the meaning of our absolute reality in artistic ways, whether it be film or writing books or photographic collage art or exhibitions or any other way. But the words of the master who could see so deeply into the situation has the ripples are still going on today. So I'm really very grateful to that process, because it's I have to keep my eyes and ears open all the time, and these new ripples appear, and then I run with this and that creative project, and the work keeps on extending and extending and extending. And for that, I'm really very, very grateful to Rinpoche, who set me on this path. I wanted to mention that the Rainbow Bridge book, which I've been reading the meditations and the verses from, there's also a commentary in here as well. And these are only available. I've only got a very few copies of these books left. They're available with me. I have them in my hand at home. And I'm in the Indian Himalayas in Himachal Pradesh. So sending them around India is very, very easy. And if you would like to obtain a hard copy or even the PDF of this book, then you can go to my website, pyramidkey.com, and then /avert-rainbow-bridge. And there is a page with instructions as to how to do that, and I'll send you the copies directly. Unfortunately, in India, the PayPal mechanism doesn't work, so only a bank transfer is possible in that. In the case of books going inside India, but shipping is free inside India. So I just wanted to mention that point, as these books are not going to be available on Amazon at this point in time. So Shalini, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Susan. It was great hearing from you, and especially I loved the mandala pictures which you were showing at the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
So thank you, Susan.